When I first met Daniel, he was the calmest person I had ever known. That was what drew me to him. In a world where everyone seemed loud, chaotic, and desperate to be noticed, Daniel was quiet. Measured. Observant. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, his words were careful and thoughtful, like he had weighed every possible meaning before releasing them into the air. I thought I had found safety. We met at a bookstore cafe on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was struggling to carry too many books and a cup of coffee at the same time when one slipped from my arm. He caught it before it hit the ground. "You look like you're trying to read the entire world at once," he said gently. I laughed. "Maybe I am." He didn't flirt. He didn't brag. He just asked about my favorite author and actually listened to my answer. 3 months later, we moved into a small apartment together with creaky wooden floors and a balcony that overlooked a quiet street. I remember standing in the empty living room, sunlight spilling across the floor, thinking, this is the beginning of something good. And for a while, it was. Daniel cooked dinner most nights. He left small notes in my bag, "Don't forget to smile today." He remembered my deadlines at work better than I did. When I had a migraine, he turned off all the lights and sat silently beside me, his hand resting lightly on my arm. He never raised his voice. He never argued. He never seemed angry. That should have been the first sign. The changes were subtle. So subtle I didn't notice them happening. He began correcting small details in my stories. "That's not what happened," he'd say calmly when I told friends about a memory. "You're remembering it wrong." At first, I laughed it off. I've always had a scattered memory. But he was so certain. So steady. Then he started pointing out my overreactions. "You're very sensitive," he would say with a faint smile. "I worry people might misunderstand you." It sounded caring. It felt protective. But slowly, I began to doubt myself. Was I too emotional? Too dramatic? Too forgetful? When I cried after a stressful day at work, he would watch me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not annoyed. Not concerned. Just, observing. "You're fascinating when you're upset," he once said quietly. I thought he meant it as a compliment. The isolation happened gently. He never told me not to see my friends. He simply pointed out how tired I seemed after spending time with them. "They don't understand you the way I do," he'd say. He would highlight every minor disagreement I had with someone. "Notice how she dismissed your idea? I would never do that." Soon, staying home felt easier. Safer. He began managing our finances, to reduce your stress. I agreed because numbers overwhelmed me. He assured me it was temporary. When I asked about a missing payment once, his eyes went cold for just a fraction of a second before he smiled again. "You must have forgotten. We talked about it." I started apologizing for things I couldn't remember doing. The first time I realized something was deeply wrong wasn't during an argument. It was during a party. We were at a coworker's house. Music played softly, people laughed, glasses clinked. I was telling a story about a childhood memory when Daniel interrupted. "That's not true," he said lightly. Everyone laughed, assuming he was teasing. But he kept going. "You tend to exaggerate. It's one of your quirks." The room felt smaller. I tried to defend myself, but he calmly listed corrections, each delivered with that same gentle tone. By the end, I felt foolish. On the drive home, I asked why he embarrassed me. "I didn't embarrass you," he said. "You embarrassed yourself." I was helping. His voice never rose. Mine did. And that night, for the first time, he didn't comfort me when I cried. He simply watched. A week later, I found something strange on his laptop. I wasn't snooping. I had borrowed it to check my email. A document was open. It was titled with my name. Inside were notes. Observations. Subject exhibits heightened emotional responses to perceived criticism. Attachment dependency increasing. Social circle narrowing. Self-doubt successfully reinforced through gentle contradiction. My stomach dropped. It read like a research file. On me. When he walked into the room and saw what I was reading, he didn't panic. He didn't shout. He closed the laptop slowly and looked at me with mild curiosity. "You weren't supposed to see that yet," he said. "Yet?" My voice shook. "I've been studying behavioral patterns," he explained. "You're very responsive to subtle influence. It's remarkable." I couldn't breathe. "You've been manipulating me." "Manipulating is such an ugly word," he replied. "I prefer influencing." He said it like he was discussing the weather. I packed a bag that night. My hands trembled so violently I dropped my phone twice. He stood in the doorway watching me. "You won't last a week without me," he said softly. Not cruelly. Just matter of fact. That hurt more than if he'd screamed. I stayed with my sister. I didn't tell her everything at first. I felt ashamed. How could I have lived with someone like that and not known? The answer came slowly in therapy. Psychopaths don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like safety. My therapist explained how Daniel likely lacked emotional empathy but possessed cognitive empathy. He could understand emotions intellectually without feeling them. That made him precise. Strategic. He had studied me the way someone studies a puzzle, and I had mistaken attention for love. Recovery was not dramatic. There were no confrontations. No revenge. Just quiet rebuilding. I reconnected with friends. Some had sensed something was wrong but hadn't known how to say it. Instead of blaming me, they welcomed me back. With gentle warmth that made me cry in a very different way than before. My sister would sit beside me at night when the silence felt heavy. "You're not crazy," she repeated often. I had to relearn how to trust my own memory. My own reactions. My own feelings. One afternoon, months later, I saw Daniel at a grocery store. He was standing in the produce aisle, examining apples with the same calm precision. For a split second, my chest tightened. He noticed me. Our eyes met. He smiled. Not warmly. Not cruelly. Just assessing. And something inside me shifted. I walked toward him. Not to argue. Not to accuse. Just to reclaim something. "I remember things clearly now," I said quietly. He tilted his head slightly. "That's good," he replied. There was no apology. No anger. No regret. Just that same empty steadiness. I expected to feel rage. Instead, I felt something else. Pity. Not for what he had done to me. But for what he would never experience. Real love. Real connection. Real vulnerability. He could imitate them. Study them. Analyze them. But he would never feel the messy, overwhelming, beautiful chaos of loving someone without strategy. As I walked away, I realized something powerful. He hadn't destroyed me. He had revealed parts of me I needed to strengthen. My boundaries. My instincts. My voice, living with him, had nearly erased me. But leaving him rebuilt me. Kindness became my rebellion. I began volunteering at a community support group for people recovering from emotionally manipulative relationships. I didn't share my story immediately. I simply listened. The way Daniel once had. But differently. When someone cried, I felt it in my chest. When someone doubted themselves, I gently reminded them of their strength. No observation notes. No experiments. Just presence. One evening, a young woman sat across from me, twisting a tissue in her hands. "He's so calm," she whispered. "Maybe I'm the problem." I leaned forward. "Calm doesn't always mean kind," I said softly. "And questioning yourself doesn't mean you're wrong." Tears filled her eyes. In that moment, I understood something deeply. The greatest revenge against cruelty is not cruelty in return. It is compassion. Daniel had studied me to find my weaknesses. But he had overlooked my greatest strength. My capacity to care. And that was something no manipulation could ever take away. I lived with a psychopath, and had no idea. But I also survived one. And now, when I look at myself in the mirror, I don't see someone naive or foolish. I see someone who learned the difference between attention and affection. Between control and care. Between silence and safety. And every time I choose kindness, real, vulnerable, uncalculated kindness, I know I am nothing like him. And that knowledge is the most freeing thing of all.